The 5 chord naturally carries a lot of tension and is an important function of the tension resolution dynamic in music. For example, in the key of C major would be our 1 or tonic chord, and G major would be our 5 chord, also known as the dominant. If we play a typical 1-4-5 progression, we can immediately hear how the G major 5 chord pulls us back to the tonic of C major, known in music as resolution. Another common resolving movement, also known as a cadence, is a 2-5-1 sequence. To enhance this 5 chord tension, musicians typically play it as a dominant 7th chord. So in our C major key example, G major would become G7. So the 5 chord can be considered a natural route back to the 1 or home chord of both major and minor keys. This is why the tonic and dominant have become established as the most important relationship in tonal music. In jazz, and styles influenced by it, this dominant 7th 5 chord can be added to and altered to further enhance its harmonic tension, and therefore its pretonic function. Let's look at some examples in the key of E flat major, a common jazz key. When our tonic is rooted on the 5th string, the 5 chord root can be found directly beneath it on the 6th string. Our basic 7th shell chords for these positions would typically be as follows. The numbers in the circles on the diagram are the suggested fingering. The most common extension of the dominant 7th 5 chord is a 13th chord. In its shell form, that is, a stripped down version of the chord, we might play it like this. Let's add in another chord, the 2 chord, to create a 2-5-1 sequence. An easy way to find the 2 chord is to position its root 2 frets up from the 1 chord. In jazz, you'll often hear this 2-5-1 relationship modulate through ascending or descending keys. For example, back to the original key, if we take that 2nd string of the 13th chord shape and move it down 1 fret, we can create even more tension on the 5 position. An augmented 7th chord, another common jazz chord. These 2 chord forms, the 13th and augmented 7th chords, are the most commonly used shell forms in jazz on the 5 position. But you'll hear them in other styles, particularly blues, bossa nova, funk, and soul. Another way to play the 13th chord is using the following shape, which sounds a bit richer, albeit more of a stretch for the fingers. To add a little suspense, we could move the second string of our new 13th chord shape up by 1 fret, giving us a suspended 9th chord. If you want to see the intervals that make up these chords and give them their weird names, you'll find interval diagrams on the lesson page, linked in the description. If you really want to jazz up your 5 chord, try these variations. Going back to our 13th shape, move the 3rd string down 1 fret. This gives us a very beautiful, if slightly tragic sounding, flat 9 13th chord. What's interesting about this chord is it has an upper triad structure. If we take the top 3 strings of the shape, we get a G major triad. Now, if we move that triad to its next inversion, which you may recognise as the D shape, we can play a different voicing of the flat 9 chord. Like a lot of the more tense jazz chords, this one sounds quite dissonant by itself, but if we play it in the context of a natural progression, such as 2-5-1, its true colour comes to life. This upper triad movement we made goes some way to highlighting how jazz guitarists economise their chord vamps. Often, they'll only play 3 strings over the bass line in order to voice the chord. More on that another time. Continuing, if we visualise the basic dominant 7th shelf form on the 5 position, we can adjust the fingering to add an extra tone in the form of an augmented 11th. This typically has a different function from the other dominant chords in that it tends to modulate to another 2-5 sequence, which can theoretically be seen as 3-6. It's quite difficult to explain, but just observe and listen. We'll have to move up the neck slightly to cover this. So far, we've been playing the 5 chord with the bass position on the 6th string. But in some keys, it'll be more convenient to play the 5 chord on a 5th string root, which gives us a whole new set of chord shapes and some unique voicings we can play. For example, another common jazz key is B flat major. Our B flat tonic could be positioned at the 6th fret. The 5 chord bass root in relation to this tonic position would be 2 frets higher on the 5th string. Let's again focus on that 5th degree and go through some examples like before. Obviously, there are many other ways we can play these rather complex chords all over the neck. But hopefully, this has given you a practical starting point for giving your progressions more of a jazz-inspired sound. For the complete chord chart and more examples, visit the lesson page linked in the description. Cheers.